Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have a lot of important election news that have broken in the last 24 hours, three of which very much could impact the 2026 U.S. Senate election, so I'm going to break it all down in this video for you today. The first news that came out, and arguably the most important news, is that Republican Senator from the state of Montana, Steve Daines, officially announced he would not be running for re-election just mere moments before the deadline for the Montana registering to be the candidate to be on the ballot for November. He pulled out just before, and he endorsed Kurt Alme, the U.S. Attorney for Montana, as his successor. It happened very, very close before the deadline, so there was not enough time for any other Republicans without this knowledge to jump in. It also, worth noting, was without any knowledge of any major Democrats. For instance, former Senator Jon Tester would not have any time to jump in as well without having prior knowledge of this situation. So it's certainly something that we haven't seen a lot of in elections too much, but Steve Daines drops out last second. He endorsed Kurt Alme, the U.S. Attorney for Montana, and he also endorses him, and President Trump has endorsed him as well as fellow U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy from Montana. So how this impacts the race is, going into this race, Montana, I was viewing it as a safe Republican seat, and it does move a little bit in the direction of being a little more competitive now that the incumbent Steve Daines is not running, but I'll be getting more into that in just one moment. In terms of the current state of the race, as I mentioned, Kurt Alme will likely be the Republican nominee. He is facing two other Republicans who are not as well known, and President Trump endorsing Alme along with Steve Daines and Tim Sheehy and Governor Greg Gianforte all but wraps this Republican primary up. On the Democratic side, there are three Democrats running, the most notable being Riley Neal, a former state representative from the 62nd District in Montana. But very notable is the presence of an independent candidate, Seth Bodnar, who's the former president of the University of Montana, and he is someone that has also been endorsed, I do believe, by former Democratic Senator Jon Tester. He is viewed as the most formidable challenger to the Republicans in this race, and if there's any possibility of the Republicans losing this race, I would bet on it being Seth Bodnar being the one to potentially make this race competitive, not so much the Democrats. Before Daines dropped out, we did have some hypothetical polling of the Democrat, Independent, and Republican in the race, and Daines in the American Pulse Research poll from February was leading 52 to 25 to Riley Neal to 16 for Seth Bodnar. Without a doubt, a safe Republican race, with a lot of the vote, anti-Republican vote, being split among Riley Neal and Seth Bodnar, which is still 7% of the vote undecided. But in this matchup, when it was just Steve Daines versus Seth Bodnar in this one, it was a 51 to 42% race. Overall, roughly being about a 9-point lead for Daines over Seth Bodnar. That would not be considered a safe Senate race, a safe Republican seat. 9-point would fall under the likely Republican margin in this poll. They also did another poll in that as well, if Bodnar was a Democrat, and his numbers do go down to 40%, so he goes down 2, and Steve Daines goes up to 54, so he'd be up 14 points, but still at 14 points, that would still fall under likely Republican. So with Daines not in the race, this is now an open seat, and even though the Republican has been endorsed by President Trump and the two current U.S. senators and governor of Montana, without the prowess of being the incumbent, it does take a little bit of a hit in terms of the electability aspect. So Montana would now be on the Senate map a likely Republican state, no longer a solid Republican state. Overall, I don't think it's going to be too competitive once everything is said and done, despite the fact we did see a competitive Senate race in 2024 where Tim Sheehy defeated Jon Tester by 7.1%. Now this is going to be a more Democratic-friendly election environment, but it is still the state of Utah. Without a prominent person on the ticket like Jon Tester, we're probably going to see a margin of victory that at very least exceeds the 7.1%. So that's a very important role there in the state of Montana, and an aspect on the Senate map, as it's one more location on the map that falls out of the safe Republican hands and now goes into likely Republican, sort of along the lines of what Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, and potentially even Florida, all of which were safe Republican. Some of them have now moved into likely Republican as we get closer to Election Day. So that's what's going on in Montana. Now we have the situation that unfolded today revolving Kristi Noem and Markwayne Mullin. So Kristi Noem, who's now the former head of the Homeland Security, President Trump essentially fired her and replaced her with Senator Markwayne Mullin. There's a lot of details to go into on that one. But for the purpose of today's video, we're just going to be looking at the Senate side of things, which is Kristi Noem is out and Markwayne Mullin, the senator of Oklahoma, is now in. Now, this is very significant because in Oklahoma, there is a Senate race in 2024, and it is Markwayne Mullin's Senate race. So assuming that he would be appointed Homeland Security Secretary by President Trump, assuming he gets in there and will be confirmed by the Senate, he will not be able to run for re-election for this race, and there will have to be another Republican that will run instead. Now, the name that's been popping up the most is Kevin Hern, the U.S. representative from the 1st District and close ally of President Trump. That has been the rumored name that is going to run to replace Markwayne Mullin in the U.S. Senate, and if he does do so, it would probably more likely than not still be a safe Republican seat. Oklahoma overall in 2024, the presidential level, was one of the most Republican states of the country at Trump plus 34.3. At the Senate level, the Senate race in 2022, Langford won by 32.2%. The special election for Markwayne Mullin won by 26.5%. So even though Markwayne Mullin will not be running for Senate, assuming he is confirmed, it will be a new Republican, possibly Kevin Hern, at the top of the ticket. I did want to address this, but Oklahoma on the map does not change its rating, still at safe Republican, due to the fact that it is a very Republican state, regardless of who is at the top of the ticket for the Republicans. But I did want to touch on that because that is an important aspect of a candidate, a U.S. senator, not running for re-election, assuming he's appointed to Kristi Noem's post. Lastly, before we end this, I do want to talk about the Senate race in South Dakota, because now that Kristi Noem is out as the director of Homeland Security, there was a rumor from a few months ago that Kristi Noem could potentially look at primary challenging U.S. Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, someone that is obviously a Republican, but someone that has had some accusations of being a more rhino Republican, anti-Trump Republican, sort of in the same mold of what John Cornyn has been accused of in Texas. Now, Kristi Noem, for that, to mention Kristi Noem's point, she has been, I would say, demoted from head of U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, but she's still President Trump's United States Special Envoy for the Shield of America, a role she may just serve out and that be the end of it. But this does open the door, at very least a little bit, to a potential primary challenge against Mike Rounds in 2026. It should also be worth noting that the primary elections for South Dakota are held on June 2nd, 2026. So it's not like that if Kristi Noem decides to try and run against Rounds that she has to decide tomorrow. There's still more than 3 months away before this primary takes place. So, and then there'll be a runoff election as well on July 28th, and no candidate receives at least 35% of the vote in their respective primary. So I don't know if this is going to happen. It's all speculation at this point, but it does leave open the possibility of a Mike Rounds versus Kristi Noem primary. Now, how will that go? Who knows? Because I would assume in that scenario, Trump has already endorsed Senator Mike Rounds in the Senate race. Does he go back on his endorsement if Noem enters? Considering Trump basically demoting Noem from her current post, would Trump go out of his way to endorse her anyway? That would all remain to be seen, but I don't know if this happens, but at the very least, it's something I wanted to make you aware of. The only poll from back in 2023 of Kaplan Strategies showed Mike Rounds versus Kristi Noem. Now, Noem did lead over Rounds by a very significant amount, 53 to 26, with still 21% undecided. But at the same time, Trump has already given his endorsement to Mike Rounds as of right now. So for what this means on the Senate map, South Dakota would still remain in the safe Republican category, one of the most red states in the entire United States as well, 29.2% win for Trump in 2024. The last Senate race for South Dakota was John Thune, who won by 43.5% in 2022. Rounds won re-election by 31.5% in 2020. So still a safe Republican seat, but that is a potential Republican primary that could be underway if Kristi Noem decides to try and make a run at Mike Rounds. So overall, 3 very big pieces of news. How it impacts the Senate map, South Dakota and Oklahoma, both of which do not change in the map, still remain as safe Republican seats, but Montana does have a significant shift going from safe Republican to likely Republican now that Steve Daines is not running for re-election. Is Montana really in any danger of going blue? In my personal opinion, I don't think that it is. I think Republicans will still hold on and win the state of Montana, but it does move one more state from safe Republican to likely Republican, and it does open the potential as Montana as somewhere, if there are some polls that showed a close race, Republicans, especially national Republicans, may have to throw in a considerate amount of money and resources to holding another Republican-held Senate seat, when they're already doing so in places like Alaska, Texas, Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio, and also trying to defend very tight elections in North Carolina and Maine. Montana is just another one to add to that list that could potentially cause Republicans to try and defend it and make their resources a little bit more thin. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it interesting. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts and any comments you wish to leave. And I hope to see you in a future video.